Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today, rather unusually, we are in the Boeing 787-10 Dreamliner. The reason for this is Microsoft Flight Simulator recently had a new update, the Aircraft and Avionics Update 2. This update has provided some major improvements to the Boeing 787 in Microsoft Flight Simulator, one of the default aircraft if you buy the Premium Deluxe edition. This has now become a relatively detailed simulation of the 787 and certainly starts to capture some of the key features that make it different from previous Boeing aircraft such as the Boeing 777. It's always a treat to have a heavy airliner available to us, or a wide-body airliner in any flight simulator, and to have this 787 now reach the level it has, I am really thrilled, especially, like I say, for what is essentially a default aircraft. One of the prettiest aeroplanes in the sky, the 787 is also one of the most unique. It has many features that we still do not see on aircraft being released even now, and it is a big task to get it simulated properly in flight simulators. We have only had limited versions available so far, but this is a really nice addition to this version in Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this video, I'm going to take you through some of the new features, what they mean, and highlight some of the differences over other Boeing and conventional airliner aircraft. We're here at Gatwick, but we're going to go through all the features one by one. This won't be a full tutorial. This is just going to be an example of some of the features that maybe you'll want to use when you're simulating flights with the Boeing 787-10. It is essentially the same as, of course, as the 787-8 and 9, but we do not have those in the simulator at the moment. This is the only version available, as it's come from Asobo with the Premium Deluxe version. The 10 is essentially just the stretched version of the 787. Other variants are the 787-8 and 9, both slightly shorter respectively. Right, let's jump into the flight deck and get it powered up. Now, the flight deck previously was, although quite accurate visually, lacking in some of the system's depth and functionality. It won't surprise you to hear that actually a lot of that has been changed now. This is not a procedural video, I must be clear, or a tutorial. I do have a tutorial on the channel. That was the only time we've used the 787 on the channel before with our 787 pilot Steve. But today we are just going to power it up. So I'm going to put the battery on, I'm going to turn on the external power. There we go. And leave the external power aft off. Aft external power is rarely used. I believe it's behind some paneling. It's not as common, but the forward, left and right are now in use. Reason for this is most ground power units in airports are at the front, so it would be a bit silly to have the main one at the back. And there we go, now it powers on. This brings us to some of the first things that we can notice. The avionics have been overhauled. Now the text and font has all been adjusted to make it represent the Boeing 787's interfaces more realistically. 787 is the first Boeing aircraft to use these big style screens. The 737 MAX also now has it, but otherwise aircraft like the Boeing 777 and 75, 76 and the 73NG that we're used to do not feature this style. So it was important that they got this right, and now they have. You'll see that it's blanked out. We have the error messages, no V-speeds, attitude, flight director, map, TCAS off. This is all part of powering up the 787, but for a start we need to turn on the IRSs, so let's do that and get them going. Again, this is not in the correct order. This is just a start of just showing you what is changed. There'll be more videos to come in the future on this aircraft. Now, it can appear a bit overwhelming at first to have all these screens, but actually it's quite a simple and clever system, and now is represented much more accurately compared to the real aircraft. Or, sorry, it's more accurate as in it matches the real aircraft better. What we have here is the option to move the ICAS between these big screens. So instead of what we used to have, which was one screen in the middle, we can actually send it to either side. So it's up to the pilots which side they want it on. You can see here that our IRUs have now aligned. We have our heading and our attitude horizon. So you can choose that to be on either side, just like you can in the real aircraft. On it is worth noting we have the ICAS messages. Hydraulic pressures are low, the packs are off, the engines are shut down, and then we have, so these are the cautions, and then we have the advisories about temperature, flight deck door lock, and so on. So this is all now being modelled, not perfectly, but more accurately than it was before, to quite an impressive level, I think. Down here we have the CDU. This is the equivalent of the FMC data entry. You'll recognise this. However, in the real aircraft, this is not a touchscreen. This is a flat screen, and then you control it either with this cursor control, or you can control it with the touchpad down here, which is not functioning. In Microsoft Flight Simulator, a handy way to get around that is that you can effectively click on it as if it were touchscreen or touch sensitive, but it's not. You would use these systems. Now, if we wanted to, we can move this CDU up onto this screen up here. All we have to do is choose the MFD, multifunction, left or right half of this screen. Let's choose the right. And then I can press CDU. And that now brings that display up here. and it's divided the nav display down into half a screen. What we have is an MFD, they're called, is each of these sections we can put in an MFD as we choose. So you can see the left screen, I could now choose to put something different. For example, the systems page. I could also put over here the checklists, which are now integrated. Now these are not as long as the real aircraft checklists, as you can imagine. They're slightly longer than parking, brake and fuel control, but this is a basic checklist to get you going. The default position is the navigation display, hence it is squared. And down here, the default position is the CDU, hence it's squared, so you can press that. But now you end up with this position where you have one half of the ND and the other half without. So if I go to the right side and choose the ND as well, we get the full size ND. If the ICAS is over, that does take priority. I can now no longer move things into the right-hand MFD because the ICAS is here taking priority. It has to be displayed somewhere. So this is very impressive, again, to see this moved across. Quite a complex feature of the 787 and quite a difference. But yeah, you can do lots of things. So down here, you can see that we can choose to have the checklist, for example, and put it on the lower screen and the CDU over there on the right for the right-hand screen. Each pilot can control these two MFDs and the lower on their side only. There is the option to have a full-size ND down here if you both select ND as well. More details on all of these things to come in the future because this is getting a little bit quite a complex simulation now. It's very impressive. Very happy with this. Now if we take a look at the CDU pre-flight, you can see here that it defaults to the ident page as we're pretty used to, and it looks very much like a Boeing. So we can go through deposit it, we can put in the reference airport EGKK and then we put that in there, and I can go through to my route and do similar EGKK, and we'll go to why not just up the road to Stansted, and we'll put in a flight number of MXZ222. Good. Now we can activate it. By the way, this execute button works in the same way as the execute button here. I believe that was working already, but there we go. It's got the fuel sensed. Then we can enter our 0 fuel weight. Now this is a default aircraft, remember, so as close to it as it comes. So our weights are going to be in the flight simulator loading. So we need to add up the empty weight of 135.5, and then we're going to add that to our payload of 13.7, which gives us a 0 fuel weight 149.2. So we type that in. In it goes. Reserves, let's say we want 5 tons. That'll be your alternate and your final reserve fuel. Going to cruise at, we can just go over at 6,000 feet today, not very far, and we'll use cost index 22, and there we go. I can execute that, and then on the thrust limit page, you can now see it has the correct outside air temperature there. We can also select a derated takeoff, for example, takeoff 2 and the climb 2, so the derates are now modeled, which we'll see as we get going. Then on the takeoff page, we can enter the flaps. Now you need a performance calculator for this, something we don't have, but let's put in some numbers which will roughly work in what I think should get us in the air anyway. Put in the CG, and you can see here now FMC pre-flight complete. Now it's not quite, we haven't put in the speeds, but let's do that now. But yeah, you would need some sort of calculator for this to do that completely properly. Of course, features that have already worked would be like departure arrival. So we're going to take off from runway 26 left, and let's just do, for example, a Bogner departure. Now, if you look on the navigation display, this is all being loaded in correctly. LNAV does work. It's really very good. To adjust the range on that, we have to go over here and, like most Boeings, adjust the EVIS control range. You'll notice that there is a map showing up on the navigation display, which is also correct. The 787 has that ability, but there we go. There's our departure, left to Bogner, and then we're actually going to head right to Stansted. So I'll execute that, and it goes into magenta. And you can see here, another feature of the 787 is the messages appear with these little help boxes. Takeoff speeds deleted. Speeds deleted due to change in takeoff conditions on the FMC speeds on takeoff ref page. So there you go. Because we did it in the wrong order, it hasn't worked. So again, that message appears. We can clear it out, and it's got rid of our speeds. But we can, oh, here we go. We have some, well, I believe, our calculated speeds now. So there we go. So, like I say, this is all very interesting and not a tutorial, but for me to show you some of the things that have changed in this simulation. On the navigation display, we can bring up different options, weather or terrain. We can load in traffic, airport. So on this menu here, we can select the different things that we want to see, or we can go to plan mode and then run through our plan and see how it goes. But as we say, that left turn is correct for us for this departure. Now over here we've got the wrong mode showing. We need to set our V2. So if I go to our takeoff ref page, V2 is 162. So I'm going to put 162 in the window. And I'm going to turn on the auto throttles. I'm going to put on the flight directors. And I'm going to arm LNAV and VNAV. And you can see that we have blank for the auto throttle because it's not running now. Toga, and the LNAV and VNAV are armed. We've got the flight directors only at the moment, and they're set in the toga position, which makes sense. We're going to move the heading bug around to 2.6 left, so I can just spin that around here, and you can see it running on that navigation display. Easier to click and drag with these heading bugs often. Not a huge fan of heading bugs, as you know, on the Airbus you wouldn't have to do that. There we go. So there we go, let's stop at 5,000 feet this time round, and now we can see we have the V2, the togas, the LNAVs and VNAVs armed, and the 5,000 with the correct pitch. You can also see some different scales down here, and I'll talk about those once we're in flight, or maybe in a different video. There's lots to discuss. We can put the auto brake all the way around to RTO, and you can see over here we have takeoff 2, so the D-rated takeoff set on the engine. This is the expanded engine display, so if I press engine, that removes. So you can see so many features now working. Right, let's pressurize the airplane as we are pretty much ready to go, and we can run through getting some of the systems in line. So let's get the APU starting. So we press start, and we can monitor that now, but if we're going to the systems page, and you can see on the stat page, the APU is written there, so we can see it firing up, starting to run for us. So we'll leave the ground power until that's done. We can power up the door, power up the window heat, and we can put the passenger signs on, lights off, we'll have the nav lights on. We'll leave the fuel pumps off for now, and we will run the fans, turn on the air conditioning packs, and leave it there for now. We can put the HUDs down, which are now updated, and we'll talk about those later on. There's the standby compass, and as we come down, we'll just check that everything's in the right place. Speed brakes retracted, thrust levers should be at idle. So at some point around now, you'll be cleared to pressurize the hydraulics by the ground crew just before you go. APU is now up and running. You can see the APU generators are on and the APU is running. So, and it actually should appear on the ICAS. But we have 2 pages, you see. So if I press cancel recall, we can get to the next page. APU running, there it is. So what I'm going to do is remove the ground power, which it has automatically, as you can see. So no problem there. Set the hydraulics to auto, so that's now pressurized. Turn the fuel pumps on. Put the beacon on, check the recall again, and we can put the transponder on and make sure the trims are set. And the takeoff trim we want is 5.5, so I can set that on the display down here. You can see the little green band where we need to be in for takeoff, and that magenta number above shows you the trim you need. Again, really impressive level of detail here. So here is the 787-10 pushing back from stand. I do not fly the 787, so this is just to show you some of these changes, but it's really impressed me what's happened, as you can probably tell. So far we've seen that the screens can now be maneuvered correctly, the checklists are in there, we have ECAS warnings, we have more systems including a fuel and hydraulic system simulation running in the background. Some are more simple than others, but still it's still available. Such a long airplane, by the way, I keep struggling to film it to get the whole airplane in, but very pretty indeed. So now we're going to get it started up and taxi out. Some things to note now is that we have new sounds in this aircraft. So listen out, I'll turn up the audio a little bit and you'll be able to hear the airplane as we taxi around. There will be more tutorials coming. Please do stay tuned to the channel if you'd like to see more detailed tutorials about how to operate the Boeing 787. The 787 uses electric starter generators, similar to the Dash 8 Q400 that I used to fly. So instead of pumping air from the APU bleed through the engines to spin them round, it simply uses electricity to spin them round and then adds fuel as required. So there goes our tug. Let's jump into the aeroplane and start up those engines. As a result of this system, it can actually start both engines at once. Let's bring the ICAS display over here, put the navigation display back, and now let's start up the engines. To do this, I'm going to put the start switches both to start. What this now does, and let me just turn up the audio a bit for you, is this now spins around the N2 position, but they can't actually start the engine until I give it the fuel cutoff switches. So we're going to turn those on, and it now says auto start. The engines are now automatically starting themselves, fuel flow will be added as required, and they'll get themselves up and running for us. like I say, it does both at once. This little green line shows which is the self-sustaining point where the N2 needs to reach so that we know the engines have successfully started effectively. Now that gear should definitely be down. That'll be one of the checks. And you can hear the first officer just in time to help us out. Engines running, so APU off. Flaps to the correct position. Go with flap 5 for takeoff today. And we can go and make sure that the engine anti-ice is in the auto position. And we can press the recall. Now why it's saying cabin temperature, I'm not sure. Fuel in center tank as well. I assume we would not use the center tank until we're in the way, so we can get rid of those. APU's cooling down, doors are in auto, parking brake is set, seatbelts on, auto brake RTO, all the correct sort of messages. Let's put this other side then to full size ND, now that the ICAS is over on our side. And there we go. Now in the legs page we can connect these up, and there's a whole host of features now added in here. You can see the restrictions, the 5,000 feet magenta FMGC restriction, and other things. Holding now works in here as well. Again, loads more to discuss at a later date, and certainly something we can use on a stream. And now I'm going to get rid of the HUD for the taxi out, and we'll talk about it once we're underway. So let's head out to the runway. Some other changes include a change to the flight handling, so we'll have a look at that as we rotate, and also the speed brake logic. So if you deploy reverse, they should deploy now correctly, and likewise they should work for a rejected takeoff. I'll just let you listen to some sounds as we spool up the engine now. To me, that's sounding very nice for a nice heavy jet airliner engine set. So let's get ourselves out onto the runway and get ourselves ready to go. So we'll stick on all the lights, we'll put the strobe light on, we'll have the logo light on, why not, though I don't think it's going to do much today, and it's clear on the left and clear on the right. FO has the HUD down. Let's get ourselves underway. So to take off in the Dreamliner, how do we do it? Well, we have the auto throttle system armed, and this now has its own functioning and correct FMA. So I'm excited to try that out. We should see how it behaves. Let's get ourselves over. This is the steering tiller, by the way, very similar to the Airbuses on the 787, quite different to the older Boeing aircraft. So we're going to spool the engines up. We're then going to engage the toga button by clicking on it down here, and that will then engage the auto throttle system, which should set the thrust reference, which will be today 69.1 TPR. Once that is spooled up and set, then it should go into hold mode, and then we're going to rotate the aircraft at V1, at rotate speed, obviously V1 being our decision speed. So pretty standard sort of Boeing takeoff. Let's give it a go. Not quite aligned on the centre line there, but there we go. So we're going to spool up the engines a bit and let them stabilise. I'll just turn up the audio a bit for you. There we go. And now let's press the toga button. Throttles drive forward. There's thrust ref, and they should target that green arc, or green arrow I should say. That is thrust set. A little bit of forward pressure on the yoke. Now you would of course use the HUD normally, but we're going to talk about that once we get in the air. Yoke to neutral by about 80 knots. We're going to use a lot of the runway. The Dreamliner has very derated engines. They're powerful, but they don't use all their thrust for takeoff. It's more efficient, saves burning through fuel and engine wear. As you can see, we're going to use pretty much the whole runway here. There's V1 with an auto cool out and rotate, and we can rotate our beautiful aeroplane into the sky. Now slightly lower nose attitude than we do on the 320, positive rate, and we can bring the gear up, and there's LNAV mode engaged, as you can see. There's thrust ref, VNAV speed, so the LNAV and VNAV have engaged, and now it's climbing away at, should be V2 plus 15. Now we can engage the autopilot. There it is, autopilot, and it comes up on the PFD. So look at these enunciations, all working nicely. It says FMC over here. What that's referring to is that the FMC is in control of navigating as opposed to a radio beacon or an ILS sort of approach. Now as we accelerate above the 5 towards the 1, I can bring the flaps from 5 to 1. Above the 5 to 1. Nope, not all the way. There we go. 1. Now you can see here we have a speed limit restriction for this, which it is obeying. So it has some sort of database and navigation working. So in this case, I'm going to leave the flaps at 1 because I don't want to accelerate. I don't want to bring the flaps in until we can accelerate further. And there we go. We are in flight in the Dreamliner. Interesting to see that thrust ref mode, LNAV and VNAV speed are all working. So these have now been reworked to behave more accurately. Thrust ref means, like I say, it's targeting the reference speed. If we're to put it into vertical speed, which I can press there, I can then wind the vertical speed down, and you'll see it changes to speed mode. The autothrottle now commanding the speed by adjusting the thrust and vertical speed on the vertical profile. If we engage VNAV again, we get VNAV speed, which means that the vertical side, the pitch, is adjusting the pitch attitude to maintain the speed. But now we are capturing 5,000 feet, so it goes back to speed and VNAV path. Speed is now being controlled by the autothrottle again. It's a different way of displaying it to the Airbus, and something that is quite unusual for us to see, but that's how it's done here. We can, of course, if I bring the heading rug here, I can select a heading. So if I do that, I get heading select, and it will fly along that heading that we've commanded. I can also intervene on the speed by clicking it in, and then I can force it to fly the speed that I choose to have. For example, 250 knots. As it accelerates, we'll bring the flaps to 0. And there it goes. So here is the HUD on the 787. Now this has been completely reworked to have the correct symbology, and as you can see we have lots of correct things. Now this is worth a video on its own, of course. Highly complex amount of information on here. It is essentially the same as the PFD. We have different markers, but we have a slightly different flight path vector, and then there's a little flight path vector director, and we have an acceleration deceleration arrow here on the left. Again, I'm not an expert on this, I'm just giving you a bit of an idea of some of the features we have here. Oh, we can put our TCAS to Tara at some point as well. So there we go. So for example, if I take out the autothrottle system and disarm it and idle the engines, you'll see this acceleration arrow reduce down, which means we're decelerating. We're now going to decelerate below the selected speed, so you get this bar showing that we are getting slower than the selected speed. If we now spool up the engines, it will accelerate, the bar will reduce as we get closer to our target speed, and then it will go the other side as we go through it. Really fantastic to see this modelled here like you'd expect, and look at the way it's correctly sort of collimated or stays level against the horizon. Really great. Again, this is now a default aircraft. So let's re-engage the autothrottle. I'm going to arm it, and then I'm going to press AT, and it goes back into speed mode. Now if we look over here, we have our aux display showing the call sign, frequency transmitting on, and squawk and so on. In fact, yeah, let's put that to tier RA. That will get rid of the traffic message, which you could see all that time, which shows us that we didn't have that correctly set. And one other thing I'd like to show you now is the fact that we can also see the position in the IRUs and the GPS, and I think that's really quite impressive. If I select menu, sadly doesn't work on here, but that would show it displayed. But yeah, they now have a modelling of IRSs or IRUs and GPS in here, as well as, like I say, some basic fuel and hydraulics. Cabin pressurization also now is simulated to a certain extent. Here's a cool feature on the 787. You can see here this sort of projected line in front of us. As you expand the scale, then that should increase. There you go, you get 2 lines, and in the higher scale we get the 3 lines, showing you an expected course for the aircraft as you carry on. If I put 6,000 feet and then put vertical speed in, we'll see the level off sort of green band showing us where we'll level off. So you can see that there is some sort of vertical navigation and planning going on in this aircraft. If you look at the legs page as well, if I go through to the arrivals, if we were to put in, now I've changed it to Gatwick arrivals. If I put in ILS on 26 left, where we set off from, you can have the glide slope on or off. Again, an important feature worthy of a video on its own. And we'll go in via Timber. Sorry, no, it'll be via Willow. And I'm going to execute that. Then legs page, let's go direct to Willow. I do miss the direct to key when I fly the Boeings. And there we go, let's execute that. And now you can see it has a top of descent marker. So it is planning a vertical descent profile. It has an idea of that in its head. Let's change over to hexpascals, I think would be more appropriate. There we go. Another clever feature is this here. This scale, and it's also on the PFD, is showing us our required navigation performance versus the actual navigation performance. Now it can be displayed on the navigation display, and it is down here. Required navigation performance is 1. We need to be within 1 mile of where we think we are. Actual navigation performance 0.02. So that's why these little white bars are so small. If we were to lose navigation accuracy, these bars would grow, and we'd have to be even more accurate with our flying to make sure we are actually where we tell air traffic we are. Again, this is a big topic and a detailed system. Really impressed to see it, and something that's worth discussing in the future. There we go. So what we're going to do is I'll actually vector us for the ILS now down on 26 left, and we can have a look at a couple of features on the HUD. Just engaged flight level change mode, flitch mode, and as you can see it's gone idle, heading select, flitch speed. So it's controlling the speed of the aircraft by the pitch. So now if I wind the speed to 250, it lowers the nose. If I wind it slower, it raises the nose. So nice to see that modeled like that. So that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, the approach and landing will come in another video where there's so many other features we need to talk about. But to see this aircraft as a default aircraft now, including things like VNAV and those auto throttle modes and plenty more, really impressed. There'll be plenty more videos and guides coming on the 787-10 in the future on this channel, so do please stay tuned if you'd like to learn more about this fantastic and interesting aircraft. We'll also be looking at flying it around on stream, so you can of course stay tuned for that as well. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please keep safe and well. Bye bye.